This is Theory of Change. I'm Matthew Sheffield. Thanks for joining me. We've got a great program for you today, but before we get to it, I just wanted to let everybody know that you can go to theoryofchange.show to get the archives for this show with video, audio, and transcript of all the episodes. And then I wanted to also give a plug for Flux Media Network. Go to flux.community for more podcasts and articles about politics, religion, lifestyle, and media. And we've got all kinds of different content out there. And if you've got a project that you're into, please do reach out to us on our contact page. We're always interested in finding new people and hearing what you're doing. So, and if you'd like this show, I encourage everybody to subscribe on either Patreon or on Substack. You can go to theoryofchange.show to get those links as well. So thank you very much for everybody who's a paid subscriber. I appreciate that a lot. You guys make this show possible, and I really appreciate it. Thanks. All right, so with that out of the way, let's get into today's program. We all live in a time of unprecedented convenience. Never before have people been able to travel a short distance and get access to gigantic supermarkets filled with food from all over the world. And now you can even get it sent to your house on the same day that you order it. We can also get movies and films and television shows at the click of a button pretty much whenever we want. But at the same time, there's a huge amount of convenience in our lives. There are also a lot of struggles that have that we are also in a time of scarcity for us, that economic inequality is a lot higher than it used to be. And also people are having to reconfigure how they live and adjust to their personal relationships. Now that women are fully enabled and are aware of their rights and exercise them, men in some ways are not keeping up with that. And so there's a lot to talk about that. And also there's a lot of challenges that we all face in one way or the other, in our careers, in our relationships, in our home lives, or whatever our situation is. We have convenience, but we also have challenge. And I've got a guest here joining me today who is really working on that. And she's coming at it from a very unconventional background. And her name is Nyomi Banks. And she's the host of a podcast called Ask Nyomi, Bridging the Gap. And it is a show about lifestyle and relationships, sex and love. And she comes at it from a very unusual background for somebody in this space, but it's one that I think gives her a lot of perspective. She's a former adult film actress as well. So I'm really glad to have you here today, Naomi. Welcome to Theory of Change.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, Matthew.
Okay. All right. Well, so tell us, for people who haven't heard of your show, like what's the angle with it, and how often are you coming out with episodes and stuff?
Ask Naomi Bridging the Gap podcast. I actually created that, which is actually started off with just Ask Naomi, and it was segments that I had. I had a radio show on on Sirius XM called Chocolate Radio, and that's where I open up to the audience to where they'd be able to write into me to ask questions about sexuality, about preference of being in a relationship with a woman or a man, kind of to break those stereotypes between each other, but also give them to where they are comfortable with having those talks about sexuality or their sexual being. Where Ask Naomi Bridging the Gap came from, it came a little bit from there, but also because I'm a very spiritual person. My background that I come from, that's a part of my life. It's not my whole life, but a part of my life for the past 10 years of my life, probably a little longer, 16 years, let's say. Um, I've been an adult film star. And from there, I've learned a lot from there, but that's where I truly was able to connect spiritually um, with myself. And so, Ask Naomi Bridging the Gap podcast is a space and a place for safe space for people of different lifestyles, of people of different understandings, from different backgrounds, to be able to conversate about certain things, whether it's love, sex, relationship, cultural differences, and even spiritual uplifting. A lot of things that I really want to teach a lot of people, or really to encourage them, is to about self-love, because we can't do anything without self-love, period. Um, I can say probably 99% of us truly need to be healed. And I'm gonna say 100%. We are in a broken world. We are in a broken state right now, and this is all over the place. I think social media gives us a lot of times it can be both a positive and a negative, but it gives people voices to speak, but also it gives people a way to harm people as well. My thing is, Ask Naomi, is to bring all of those different cultures in together where we can understand each other, but also teach each other on how to speak to one another, how to serve one another, how to treat with one another, and lead with love.
It's interesting to see a program like yours. So we had talked before that you had said that your audience, is tends to be more male than female, and that is interesting because you don't see a lot of podcasts that are watched predominantly by men about sex, love, and relationships, much less hosted by a woman. And so you're in an interesting spot there. And I mean, how's that? How's that been for you? Sort of talking about this. I mean, you're obviously a very articulate and well spoken person. So I'm sure you've handled it very well. But like, has any of your audience talked about how they? Because like a lot of podcasts out there that do talk about lifestyle stuff with men tend to be male hosts. And they don't, some of them can be toxic. I think. I mean, what's your take on all that?
For me, I think just the way that I approach it, and I mean, I am an adult film star, so I don't stand in judgment of anyone. That's one thing that people can say. Well, her lifestyle or her career choice that she made, she really don't have a leg to stand on to judge anyone. And so that gives people a safe space to be able to come and talk to me because I've already been through that or I've done those things, so where I won't look down on them. As for men, I am they are more comfortable with me because, yes, once again, I've been in front of the world in a very vulnerable situation, as being nude, having sex on camera. And so for them, I will be the ideal person to have that conversation with them where they won't be embarrassed, rather than a regular woman, a everyday woman, if that makes sense. So for them to be able to speak to me, those walls are down for them because I wouldn't laugh at them. If anything, I will help them to understand what it is that they're feeling, or better yet, give them the right verbiage to be able to speak to someone about some of the desires that they need. And so it's more of an open communication coming from a non-judgmental way.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. And I mean, and it seems like to me that this is kind of an extension of what you were already doing when you were working in adult film. So that, like, I went to a book event from our guest on the previous episode, Tasha Rain, and it was, I was just struck at how wholesome these interactions were that she was having with her fans. Like, they did feel a sense of connection with her and were extremely respectful, and were interested in what she had to say. And I mean, I assume that's how it was for you when you were in the adult film industry. Is that right?
Yeah, somewhat it is. I guess the thing is truly breaking that stereotype that they put us in, that they demonize us as adult film performers, stars, or whatever you want to call it. The thing is that we have to remember that we always created through this action of sex. The thing is that we need to learn how to be comfortable in search and find to be educated. So not only for ourselves but for our children as well. A lot of people walk around with shame. Majority of the people around in society are ashamed about the word of sexuality and sexual being because they're not educated on what it is and what it is for us as a human being. We are sexual beings, we are spiritual beings, but we're not taught those things. We're taught either one way or the other. Um, I think for me, when I hear people say, um, that's unique that you're doing that. And I'm like, why is that unique that I'm doing that? I'm a person, I'm a human being that's speaking everyday things. Why is it different coming from my mouth? Because what? Because I chose to have sex on camera. that makes me different than another human being in that aspect, that I don't have the same mindset or thoughts. And you understand what I'm saying? So I guess with that process is like breaking that stereotypical stereotype of what a porn actress star should be, look like, smell, live like breaking that whole stereotype of that. And that's one of my reasons why I did Ask Naomi Bridging the Gap podcast too, is so people can look at the human side of us. Period. Yeah.
Hmm. And now, what about the women who are tuning into your show? Like, what do you hear from them? Um,
And I was surprised, as I continue on with the show and with my website element, I have more women come in and they're more comfortable. Um, I'm not um, I'm not as intimidating as I probably was before, and it gives them a voice to be able to embrace their sexuality and not be ashamed of some of the feelings that they have. And also, it's the
mhm.
battling with the spirituality too, and knowing that it's okay to feel this way, sexually in that way. It's just educating yourself on what that is and making sure that you're not harming yourself and no one else while doing that. But with women, I empower them, I encourage them to live in their truth, whatever that truth is.
Yeah. Well, now you said, yeah. Now you said you people thought you were intimidating before. What do you mean by that? I'm curious. That women thought you were intimidating.
The stereotype. The stereotype of, because she's a porn star, the thing is that I will
Mhm.
be having, be doing something every day, be having intercourse every, and that's not the, I don't do it when I'm filming. That's it. But in their
Mhm.
mind, it's a stereotype that this is what porn stars do all the time. It's like drugs and rock and roll. No, I don't do drugs.
Mhm.
That wasn't it. The sets were very professional. There was no drugs or no alcohol on none of the sets. For me, I've always tried to be very welcoming to anyone, both man or woman. You know, um,
Mhm.
because beauty comes within. It's not always, on the outside. It comes within. And so I see, women as all women are beautiful. Especially if you have a great attitude, get a great spirit, then you're beautiful to me no matter what. Um, but no,
But I
women.
think a lot of people haven't learned that. I think a lot of people haven't learned that, and
Yeah,
so because they haven't learned that, they judge things only on the surface about other people.
yes. That's one of my things, that don't judge a book by its cover. Take time to read within the pages. I've lived by that
Okay.
all of my life. Yes. Hmm.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, so now you mentioned on here a few times about how you're a very and you mentioned that on your show a lot, that you're a spiritual person, and you were born and raised in Chicago as a Baptist, and you've talked about that. You had an episode recently about with a woman who'd written a book called "Sex, God, and the Conservative Church." And so now, but so like that was something that you yourself had experienced. Can you talk about that a little bit in your own life?
Well, one thing I found out while doing my research is that Christians was the number one was the number one consumer.
Oh yeah.
That I did find out. And number two, when I did get into the industry, I did not realize that a lot of my family members were avid porn consumers. I did not know that because I didn't watch porn myself. So, I did not know that. Um, when they did find out, were there a lot of, yes, there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of talk. There was all of that. I even had some family members and friends that stopped being my friends and family members because of my job career. They didn't look at me as the person, they just looked at me.
Who they already knew.
Yeah, they didn't look at me as that. They just looked at me that I chose. And so it had to be a reason why. And the reason was never the reason why I said, which is my truth. The reason, oh, she must be doing drugs. They know I've never did drugs a day in my life. You know what I mean? Or it was this, or is that, or it was her boyfriend then. I've never listened, or anyone. They knew no one could ever tell me what to do. But this was an excuse that they had to give to themselves because they were seeing me doing something that they did not want me to do or was not acceptable to them. And plus, us being a family that's in church, Christians, Baptists, this is something that we just don't do. Now, let me tell you this: I did respect that of their choice and decision because that's what they felt. What I did is when I got into the industry, I did not go to church. The only time that I went to church was either it was a funeral or it was a wedding. Otherwise, you would not see me in church at all during the whole time that I was in the industry because that was one thing that I did not want to do. I did not want to disrespect God's house. And I knew me growing up in church with family members and stuff like that. And I've always been a praying person. I've had a praying grandmother who taught me how to continue to pray. And even through my 7, 8, well, 6 years, 6.5 years of active being in the industry in front of the camera, I prayed every day. Whenever I had a set, I was on my way to set, I would pray. So I've always had God with me spiritually. I've always had that with me. So I knew that what I was doing, I wasn't wrong for it. It was a choice that I felt that I needed to do at that moment in time for survival for myself and my family. And I'm not ashamed of it. And I remember all of those prayers that I did. I always asked God, when it's time for me to go, when it's time for me to leave this whatever's happening here, then give me a sign and let me know. And that's what he did. And I left in 2012. I was able to leave at the top of my game. And I left. And I left. And I continued to be in the industry doing radio and other things, but being hardcore and being in front of the camera, no, I stopped doing that. I stopped allowing being on set, having sex. That all that was gone. Now it was just me. Now trying to figure out what's my next role or what am I supposed to do after that. And then that's where this whole healing process come from. And this is where I talk about and speak about now on my Ask Naomi Bridging the Gap podcast and through my Elevate Me Self Discovery program.
Hmm. Yeah, and and you mentioned your reasons for getting into the business. You want to talk about those a bit?
But the reason why I got into the business was because my father was very ill. Um, and I had just literally, I probably been in LA probably for about 6 months, almost a year. It's about 8, 9 months I was in LA. I had packed up, moved, resigned from my job, just was going to LA to make it big. I was a producer, director, screenwriter, all of that. Like I've done music, all that's what I was there for, to make it big in that. And
And how old were you at that
oh,
time?
at that time I was like 29, 30 years. I was a grown woman. I was 30. Wait, no, I was like 31, 32. I just gotten a divorce, so I'm grown with a family. And so I'm there at my home and my mom calls me and she said, "Well, your dad's very ill right now." And I was like, well, he was sick before I left, but this time that he needed 24-hour care, nursing care all around the clock. And her insurance wasn't paying for it, will only pay for a portion, and she still had to pay, her rent, her house, her apartment. I mean, her home, and her, she just had to live. And I still had a little brother, a younger brother that was there with her as well, and they just had to live. And so she was asking me if I would come back home to help. And that means to come get a job there and work from there to help with it. And so I told her, well, Mom, let me call you back. Let me see what I can do here. And so I knew I was kind of making momentum in the mainstream thing with doing, different shows and movies and stuff like that that I have been doing. And I really didn't want to leave LA because I figured that this is where I was going to be. This is where me and my family was going to be. But I still wanted to be able to help my parents back at home. So I had previously did some nude modeling, Playboy, Penthouse, overseas, and stuff like that, and it paid pretty well. And so I had answered this ad in the paper for figure models, and I went to go see Jim South. Jim South was one of the big. Well, now that I know who he is, back then I didn't. I just knew him as Jim South. But it comes to find out he was one of the biggest adult actresses agency. Actually, he was the one who signed Tracy Lord. So when I went to him, you know, with I had my whole book portfolio and everything with him to show him that. And we took pictures, and he said, you would do great in video. And I was like, well, no, I've done music videos. Um, and I really didn't want to, kind of get it because I knew what kind of money that I wanted, that I needed to be able to help them. And I knew once you get published, someone sees you, then you on that, everybody that wants to, shoot you again and again and again. And that brings more money. And he said, no, you'll do really good in video. I'm talking about adult video. And I was like, well, no, I'm not interested in that at all. Like, no, no, I'm not. As I'm walking out of his office, I walked past another office to actually one of the young ladies. I actually did mainstream modeling with her. We were on the scene together, doing modeling. But her then husband, he was in there. He told me to come on in, and I came in. And I spoke to him, and I gave him my portfolio. And he as well said, well, you should do some videos. And I again thinking music videos. I said, well, no, I've done music videos. I really don't, really. He said, well, no, I'm talking about these. And he pulled up a CD with the pictures, and it was a porn video. And I was like, well, no, I don't do that. No, I don't do that. So I went home, forgot about all of that. Then my mom called me again. And she said, have you made a decision on what you're going to do? Because we really need your help. And so I said, well, give me a minute, mama. Let me figure some stuff out. And the little money that I had did this residual from this EA Sports gaming that I had did, and I had sent her the residual for that to hold her off for a minute. And I said it, and I started doing my research. But let me go back. So I had to do this job in New York, and I flew to New York to do this job in New York. And on my way back, I was watching. You know how back in the day when they had the TVs in on the plane, so I was able to watch the documentary on Jenna Jameson. And I was watching her, and I heard her say how much money was to be made. And, of course, she made it look so glamorous, and I was like, okay, well, maybe let me go back in home and do some research. And that's what I did. So I spent a few months doing some research. And during that time, I was just sending money back to my mom from the residuals and things that I was making from work that I've done previously in mainstream. And when I did my research and I found how much money that it was making, I found out how much of a big brand that I can truly create. And then I just started going from there, mapping out what I was going to do. And then I went on and did it. I called looking for an agent. I had a friend of mine who was a photographer. He came in and took my pictures. So I kind of went in and knew what companies I didn't want to shoot for, what companies I did want to shoot for, what kind of image that I wanted to put out there as a woman of color, being in this industry. So to myself at that time, I figured I dotted all my I's, crossed all of my T's, and put the exclamation points on all the bottoms. So knowing going into this industry,
Yeah.
that I will be protected as much as possible as I could be. With the testing at that when I came in at that time, it was you had to have mandatory testing before anything. So I went through that process and did that. And so it was very welcoming. Everybody was very welcoming when I came in. So then I finally went back to Jim South, and he was like, okay. And he sent me around to everybody. And then I was offered a contract. And then from there, my lawyer at that time, we discussed, and he was like, well, you're not really trying to be in here long term, right? You said you only had a 5-year plan for it. And I said, yes. He said, well, don't take the contract, kind of go around and do this so you can make that money and then you can go. And that was my idea of what I was, thinking of doing. But then all of a sudden, everything started to blow up. And before I knew it, my name was all over the place. And then my family found out. And then I'm here now.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, now, what did your parents think when you told them where you were getting the money from? What did
Well,
they have to say?
because I didn't tell them anything, they found out. So they found out probably like maybe about 6 months, 7 months later, about 7 to 8 months later, they found out I had gotten a phone call from my sister, and she was crying, and I was like, "What's wrong?" And I can laugh at it now, and she said, Why did you tell me that it was something going on with you? And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, I just saw this. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, you saw what? She's like, yes. And it's just like, and and the family, they've been watching it for a while and it's just got back to me. Why did you tell me? And I was like, oh, because we were really close and I had been talking to her. But my grandmother knew something because I used to talk to my grandmother every day. And when I was doing when I was active in the industry when I first got, I wasn't calling her every day. I would call her like every 3 or 4 days, and she would ask me, "Well, how you doing, baby? Is everything good?" And I would just send her money. I would just send her money. I would just send my mom money. So they just, thought I had did a couple of shows that they had saw me on. And so they was like, okay, so this is where the money is coming from, not knowing that that really wasn't no money, but that's what they thought that it was coming from. So I didn't say anything until, two family members actually, went and took it to my grandmother. And
Ah, okay.
yeah, and that's how they found out. But when I finally did talk to my mom and my grandmother, um, they just told me to be safe. My grandmother said, "I know," and man, and I'm not gonna cry because my grandmother said to me, she said, I know you," and she said, "I know there's a reason on why this is happening." She said, "I just want you to be."
Mm.
That's all she said. She said, "I just want you to be safe." My mom said the same thing. My mom said, "I am not here to judge you. That's what God does. That's not me." And then she asked, "Do y'all really have sex?" And that was it. And then from then on, I knew if I had them two and my dad and my sister, if I had my immediate family in there, then would anybody else say that didn't matter? I had my support system with them, and which truly helped me through because I see a lot of the young women that's in the industry that don't have that support system that I had. um, and I think that truly would help make me, create me as being the stronger that I am because I did have that support system. My show, I had probably one of the first ones to kind of cross over that kind of had the melanin like I do was the beautiful, iconic Dominique Simone. She was one of the first one. Her, Heather Hunter, Jen and Jack, me. They were more in the golden ages back in 80, 88, 89, in the late 80s, 90s. That was the old golden era. When I came in, I kind of had my own look of, in certain things, and I came in right when the internet was popping. And when I was speaking with Dominique yesterday, she thought I was in when she was in. She was like, "How your name was so big and you only came in 2006?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Because I came in at 30 something years old. I knew exactly what I wanted. I had researched all the companies that I wanted to shoot for. And then I was just blessed to be on set with some people that looked and said, okay, you're supposed to be over here." And they took my hand and took me over there, meaning they helped lead me over there to meet other people. And I knew when to say no and I knew when to say yes. I knew all money wasn't good money. So there's a lot of things that I shot and a lot of things that I didn't shoot.
Obviously, one of the issues that you were dealing with, was being a black performer in an industry that, especially historically, had had a lot of, well, frankly, racist business practices. How did you feel about that going into it? And how was it for you when you were in it? And how do you feel like things are now for today's black performers?
Ah,
That's a big question, I know.
I'm gonna try to break it up. And when I got into the industry, I remember a friend telling me that it was going to be hard for me as an older black woman. And but even though I didn't look that age, so I even had a fake ID that had me 10 years younger.